Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock, so we'll resume now, if we could please. For those of you who don't know, William Fieldhouse, the Inspector appointed to State to examine the Newham local plan. Just a couple of housekeeping things, please. If you could turn your phones and laptops, etc., turn to silent. It's not far afternoon, so people will need to evacuate them on that side through the section to accommodate outside the building behind me. We've onto the agenda items for this afternoon, which include affordable housing, liability, some other issues about what happens next in the examination. So we'll move on to those things shortly. As usual, I'll usually have some questions for council to start with, and then if you're interested to make a contribution, please just put your nameplate up on end. And I'll bring you into the time. I think we'll go around the table and let people introduce themselves, people who were here this morning. So let's do that first. If there's any people have before we start. Can I start with the council?
Principal Banner at Newham.
And the of the Equity Power Real Estate for Newham liability.
Newham, Interim Planning Policy Manager.
David GLA Planning Team.
Karen Montgomery, GLA.
Ben Ford representing Brilliant. Jake Bradley from Newham.
President Hampshire Planning, representing Ramona King, LDC.
Okay, everyone. Hello, everyone. Right. Does anyone have any queries or procedural questions before we start? No. Just before we go on to affordable housing, AIN didn't attend this morning. They had told Charlotte they weren't going to be able to attend. It isn't a reason to allow further submissions in itself. The opportunity to arrange to attend this morning, which they did. However, mid-morning, whilst we were in session, sent an email to Charlotte with questions about some of the council responses to that. I've asked her to send it on to you, so probably if you know where it's come in. So procedurally, I've got a choice really. I can accept it. It was if they sent it in yesterday, I could have decided to accept it. I could have reflected the questions I had to the council, and we could have discussed them, which would have been one way of dealing with it. Well, the best way of dealing with it would be for them to have come. So probably something I could have managed. So the choice now is to sort of just ignore that and say too late, you could have come and you could have sent that in earlier. Of course, that means that they will have the opportunity to make the representations when the notifications are published. So I suppose it's over to you. I mean, I've not looked at any detail to my action points. I suppose I see your view last time, but it'll be later. It's to decide whether to accept that, and if you to comment on it before I decide whether if any of the modifications we have drafted need tweaking in any way. So, do you want to say anything now, or should we just leave?
Yeah, I think we can come back to you.
Yeah, do you want to come back later today then, and we'll decide. It may be pragmatic to let you to accept it, let you respond, and then I can, of course, talk about it if necessary. Okay, not ideal. Right, so that brings me on to affordable housing. So right back on the up-to-date one, we talked about the viability evidence and asked the council to consider, that evidence indicates, with all the policy requirements in the plan, that most of the allocations will be viable. And we've discussed it several times, the difficulties of carrying out a whole plan viability assessment in London and in Newham in particular, with the plan that allocates types of sites that it does and the complexity that they have and the variations that they have in them. But the fact remains that the national policy expects plans to be tested for viability as best it can, and the indication is that that should form a basis. The policy requirements should be set based on that evidence, such that most developments are likely to be viable. So that's the kind of context. Anyway, so on the basis of the initial viability evidence, I So I haven't made my mind up yet, but getting back to council to decide in what way you recommend that plan be modified to improve the viability. So that response to that was published last week, and that was basically proposed modifications to policies setting out affordable housing requirements. And we'll go through each of those. I think the general approach, correct me if I'm wrong, is to bring it largely on London plan requirements. So we'll go through each of them and give another opportunity to point out any issues that they have with that. So we'll deal with that, and then we will go through the other agenda items in the context of that and what the implications are for viability. We also have a response to the FM4 and what that says about viability and prioritisation, meeting the plan's objectives if viability indicates that you can't do everything. And then we'll look at the overall viability picture based on the documents provided in terms of summary of the outputs against the different policy requirements. Okay, so before I go into some of the detail, is there anything in general terms that the council its response? No. Okay, so let's go through H3 and then the policies that then follow on from that in terms of the affordable housing requirements. So the modification, which hopefully you will see, it basically talks about the strategic town, 50% rural new homes, and that lets London talk about strategic target, and the London plan express the way that the target is met in various ways, including through public funding of schemes, etc., etc. So it's kind of overall policy. So I suppose the first question: what does it mean new in that context? Is it anything different, or
not really? No, I mean, we've got to align with, sort of align with the London plan approach, which is strategic partnership, and then and then sort of following the fast track approach for how that 50% is delivered. You've got quite a lot of state regeneration schemes, and you say there's also opportunities for grant funding to try and bridge that gap up to 50%, 35% required by the fast track approach for private sites. Just sort of aligning with what's the London plan. So
it means the same thing as a strategic target does in London.
Yeah.
But in terms of what it means for developers, that brings us on to the subsequent parts of the policy in terms of how they contribute towards that 50%.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that brings us on to new residential developments, sites with capacity for 10 or more. A percentage of affordable housing should be through the threshold approach as set out within policy H5 and plan 2021. Two questions about that. Three questions about that. By referring directly to London Plan 2021, is that meant to? I mean, that will become out of date.
It will, yeah. I think, to be honest, that's probably just a consistency with how we refer to the London plan throughout the document. But yeah, no, I think we can refer generally to the London plan as well.
It's not. It couldn't, but it's not intended to try and lock it to the current London plan in a way that maybe couldn't. Okay. There could be, but also I suppose it raises the question about the consultation. I think the draft London planning guidance and the interim measures that are put forward in that. It's not trying to say they wouldn't be applied in Newham. It's just the London plan and the guidance that goes with it.
Yeah, exactly. So when if that guidance comes out in the form that it's currently in, that would be a material consideration in our decision making. And obviously noting the GLA would probably call it anything that they felt didn't accord with what's set out in that practice. So that would come to that way.
And it refers to the threshold approach set out in H5, the London plan, which I'm just looking at, which policy H5 is called the threshold approach. So is that simply just trying to say that policy H5 will be applied? H5 includes a threshold, but it also includes a fast track route. Your policy doesn't refer to fast track.
No, I think sometimes I can maybe mistakenly refer to those slightly interchangeably. I mean, we'd be happy to refer to it as fast track instead of the threshold approach.
As I say, the London plan policy is called threshold approach.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of headline. So, okay, fine. So it's meant to simply say we'll apply H5.
Yeah, exactly.
With a threshold and then the fast track. Okay. In terms of part B, that as a tenure mix, 30% low cost rent, 30% intermediate, and 40% the borough to decide.
Yes.
So you could, it's consistent with that because you've got the 30 and the 30 embedded.
Yeah.
Split the 40 as we.
Yeah, the split there is based on our evidence, which shows a general split between the intermediate and social in terms of need of about 65-35.
So that's consistent because you've got at least 30, but you added the 5 onto the intermediate and the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Right, understood. So that then brings us on to the next paragraph, which is not modified other than deleting the body. This says development of requirements and the delivery of the required level of family dwelling houses not be supported unless they're accompanied by financial liability assessment. So is that consistent with the London Plan Policy H5C fast track?
I think it is, yeah, because the London Plan does talk about, I can't remember the exact clause, but it does talk about the requirements the fast track also have to satisfy any other considerations the borough has. And I mean, in our particular case, I think we've talked about it a lot, but along with affordable housing, our other key need is for family housing.
Yeah, so part H5C says in the fast track route, as we summarised, it meets other relevant policy requirements and obligations to the satisfaction of the borough.
Yes.
And the mayor are relevant. So you're saying to get fast track, threshold 35%, plus reach our family housing requirement, which we're going to come on to because that's been qualified as well. Yeah. And then you can qualify fast track, irrespective of BFN4 privatisation, employment and training and stuff.
Yes, so those would be the only two things that would apply in terms of do you want to come in?
Yeah, so BFN4, the fast track will not apply. BFN4 will not apply to the fast track. So the thinking is that if they do put in a viability assessment for their schemes, then that BFN4 will apply. But the fast track it doesn't because it will skip the viability altogether.
Yeah. Okay. So you meet the 35%, apply with the family housing requirement, that's modified, and then you're into the fast track.
Yes.
So the only thing that you're saying is explicitly meeting the requirements to the satisfaction of the borough is the family as well as that.
Yes.
Okay, understood. We'll see what others think about that. That's clear enough, yeah. Finally, part 2B, which is the 60 to 50% strategic target on sites.
Yes, it does.
So that's 50% rather than 35% because.
In the case of providing site or payment in lieu, our priority is very much the delivery of family and affordable on site and meeting that overall strategic target. So from our perspective, anything where the sales or land values, the sales or rent values of that private development might be higher as a result of providing family affordable housing, we would expect them to look to exceed the strategic target of 50% in terms of their payment in lieu. And if they can't, then they're their assessment and closely scrutinise that.
Okay. And is that requiring that 50% for off-site payments? Is that consistent with the London Plan approach?
I don't think it's specified necessarily in the plan, is it?
I think in terms of payment new, obviously it will need to be following the viability test route. That means the threshold approach of affordable housing following goes back to the strategic target in page 4, which is
So it is consistent then, that approach from the 50 if you're going to be either to an offsite, yeah. Right, okay, understood. Thank you. In terms of the plan, how we measure these percentages, whilst the London Plan policies are expressed in terms of just talk, the strategic has 50% of all new homes. Anyway, but in the London Plan, the metric is preferably habitable rooms. It asks applicants to provide that along with percentages expressed in terms of floor space and units. That's correct, yeah? So that the metric, the preferred metric, and this is to allow an appropriate mix of dwelling types as well, yeah, is to have habitable rooms.
yeah, that's the program.
So what, I don't, does it say in here in this picture?
We deleted one of the modifications. We deleted reference to the fact that the affordable housing target measured in units, because that was the previously proposed approach. So now, in terms of it referring back to the London Plan H5 policy, we'd expect that affordable housing targets would be measured using habitable rooms.
And going back to what you're saying about family housing,
That would be measured in units.
see, that we measured units, but is one of the purposes of doing the affordable housing programs to allow mix, more flexibility around the mix.
Exactly, yeah. I think we would expect the family house group to prioritise the affordable units, and that potentially might again add a little bit of
Gives them more incentive
exactly.
to get 4
Yeah,
or more.
you're getting more habitable rooms.
Okay. So you said that there's a mod that proposes deletion of the reference to units.
It's just in the implementation text, I think.
Okay, but that's the intention anyway.
Yeah,
Just make
exactly.
sure. Right, okay, well, I'll pause there. And see if, is there anything else you want to say on page 3?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay, anyone else wish to comment on page 3?
Thank you. Yes, I think overall we appreciate the moves to the London Plan. I think we do still have some concerns that the London Plan thresholds aren't achievable in most schemes at the moment, which is evidenced by recent schemes going through the planning committee. 3 in particular have gone through with single figure percentages of affordable housing, as well as the emergency measures being currently proposed by the GLA. Although I know you just said about not trying to avoid bringing that sort of those emergency measures into consideration, so that's definitely appreciated. I think we have some concerns about the kind of overall viability assumptions that sit behind the policy and the evidence base, which you might can expand further. But yeah, I think in general it's definitely a positive move, and appreciate the alignment with them have rooms and the way it's happening. I just have a question. Sorry, I think you might have answered this a minute ago, but the sort of fast track and the viability reviews, just from my understanding. So you meet the threshold to get 35%, 50%, 65, 35, 10-year split, and you hit 40% family in the social element.
Well, that's the mod, isn't it?
Yes, in the mod.
Yeah, okay. That's the question now, then we'll come back to it.
Then there's no viability application stage, and you're there's no late stage. Yeah, agree with you. I think the point that you're referring to, obviously H5 and 2021 London Plan, it's quite a big view, so obviously H5 might not exist.
And in terms of habitable rooms, the metric,
Yes.
do you,
Exported of that line of the London Plans.
so clarity that that's what that is. Yeah. In terms of the overall picture of viability, can we come back to that?
Yeah, I was just going to ask one question.
Yes.
A clarity question.
Yeah.
That maybe help. It's just to understand how you determine 50%. How do you calculate the centres were able to represent.
I'll come to this one. Okay. Yeah, DC.
Thank you. I agree with Barrymore that it's a very positive move in policy in terms of being with the London plan. So that's appreciated, especially with what. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, for our benefit, we would like to see clarity in terms of how this gets applied to portfolio sites, given that we have sort of levels and tenure mixes that have already been pre-agreed with the GLA and part of the Section 106 agreement. But we do appreciate that these sites become forward with new planning applications. So it's just understanding, if with the portfolio for housing, but not necessarily aligned with the policy that the track group, would it still be empty or example? But yeah, I hope that's clear.
Okay, well, let the council come back and answer that if they can. Tim William.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I think we support the change. We support the changes. They come back into reflecting an evidence base, but ultimately we're now looking at a policy that removes plan, which is of course going to be out of date next month after 5 years without review. So I think we're in a position where we've got a 50% strategic target, which is demonstrated as not being viable. We've got a 35% target from the fast track threshold, which is not viable in most of the scenarios tested. And we've got a 20% target that has now been tested that is viable in most of about 50% or more scenarios tested, but that is based upon a number of exclusions that we've been detailed into, including costs, possibly I think building safety levy quite safely, and therefore we have recommended that the policy does clearly refer to the viability test route in the London plan, which is a route in capitals, its own special entity in H5F. And we have suggested that that is a maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing drawn out of the viability test route is given equal weight. We have also suggested that in terms of transparency, that the limitations of the whole plan viability assessment, which we fully recognise can only do so much and is at point of time, is included as a supporting paragraph within the policy, just recognising that there are assumptions in there and that there are exclusions that are just listed, and therefore the weight as such given to that is recognised accordingly. So we're not looking for anything from the data that needs changed. Those 2 points are calculation. So
Yeah, okay. I'll come back to the BFN4. I think you're talking about some paragraphs in the reason justification to BFN4. Are you?
Well, actually, no. It was to just for housing policy.
Right.
Nothing's been proposed, but
no. But it could be there, but if it's a general point about the viability evidence, the site-specific viability assessments, they're covered in BFN4. So it could be there. So can we come back to that? Sure. At that point when we talk about that. But in terms of the H3 and the percentages, just be clear. Yes, it's actually consistent with the London plan, but ambitious.
I'm saying it's partially saying, and this issue is whether you're legally consistent with the London plan, or whether you're affected by replicating what the London plan does. So the London plan, we're in a slightly unusual situation that we're having to be in full compliance with general plan. The London plan is now 5 years old as of next week, and we seem to be applying a policy that has had its challenges in terms of delivering housing over a number of years. So it's positive that there are amendments to this policy, but the previous policy that was drafted wasn't standard in any event. So we're back just reflecting the London Plan policy H5.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is the London Plan policy explicitly says on F that there is a vulnerability testing route, which carries equal weight to the fast track threshold, but that it doesn't sit as a primacy of the policy, and we suggest it sits as H31 A2, let's go that way one.
Okay, understood. But I mean, I think if this modification, the tweet, to just refer to as set out within the London Plan, future proof it, it would then be clear that it's just complying with the London Plan policy. I mean, I think, and that's, yeah.
Well, if you're a resident of Europe or a councillor, you look at that and you see 50% of them have that's your expectation of what development is going to achieve by way of affordable housing. And we know that that's not possible in this case. The evidence suggests that. So we are in danger of leading people to believe they're going to get affordable housing. I appreciate us technicians know the detail behind this, but we're setting ourselves up to fall to 50% is not a viable position. And it won't be for the next 10 years probably, but if not long, forever. So we're just, we're setting ourselves some challenges, and there's an opportunity now, I guess, to try and readdress those challenges if we can possibly do so to help deliver housing and housing generally.
Okay, understood. Okay, on that last point, I suppose specifically, I'll go back to the council. I mean, the policy is delivered, well, I mean, policy class A, part 1A, as modified, is delivered, well, it's silent on what the percentage is, and therefore it's in effect, if they run the percentages change for the threshold, that's like, this would just automatically follow that. Suppose running the 50% actually is planned. If that were to change in the London plan, you'd then be, whether that people would still lead the council, the Newham strategic target is 50%. So why? It's a really point, I suppose. What's the justification for it?
I mean, the strategic target is based on the significant needs that we have as one of the areas, the whole country which experiences, the housing crisis. Perhaps it's most extreme. You've got huge numbers of people on our waiting list. You've got the highest level of temporary accommodation in the country. It is, we've sought to incorporate the underplan approach to achieve target and the flexibility that's provided through the threshold approach. But fundamentally, it's important to express it on 50% strategic target, because that is very much reflective of the need to be happy with them. I think it's slightly disingenuous to put forward that schemes won't progress if there's a 50% strategic target, because at the moment we have the exact same strategic target, and our councillors are very well aware when they're making decisions about the importance of viability, making those decisions. We've heard examples about schemes with lower percentages. So I don't see the risk so much that's willing to put forward here.
The mechanism to work towards, or the contribution the private sector make, is definitely by parts A and B. That's what they're going to do. Okay. Right, understood, I think. There was a couple of other points on this slide. There's the portfolio issue for the BC, and then there's the
I think it's about calculating.
Yeah, that's right.
The payment in lieu.
Yeah, the payment in lieu.
So take the payment in lieu point.
Yeah, well, the London plan, sort of planning guidance, the ultimate payment in lieu. There's a methodology that's set out in that document. I know that views on that vary. Some parties believe that it should be based on a comparison of two residual valuations, one with housing and one without, to justify the uplift in land value. But that's an approach that the GLA doesn't accept.
Okay.
Mr. Nick may want to comment on that at some point, but this in terms of what the documents say, that's what documents say, the GDV, in essence.
Right, okay. So the way that policy will be implemented doesn't, I mean, it's, if the outcome is set out, I mean, sorry, the policy intent is set out there, doesn't need to flesh out the detail of how we've done it, because that's done through the plan guidance. Yeah, okay, thank you. And the other one about the portfolio approach.
Yeah, so that's, I think it's sort of, yeah, it's set out in H4 how people assess portfolios, but if there is an existing portfolio approach via 106 and like future REMs come in for that side, then that would be, you know, material consideration in that decision making process. The reason that we've included the new clause in H4 is we have had instances where portfolio approaches to family or affordable housing that are agreed, and then the more expensive forms of housing, like the family housing, have been left later in the portfolio, and then there's been challenges in actually delivering the green percentage of family housing at that point in time. So part policy H4 part 4, I know part 6, I think it is just to, you know, try and combat that difficulty that we've had, you know, in our current experience of applying portfolio approaches to sites.
Okay. Right. Anything else anybody wants to say about H3? No? Okay, thank you. Which brings us on to policy H4. What it here is to keep percentages for 40% of homes to be dwelling, 3 or more bedrooms. Would then the modification would apply that only to the social rents.
Yes.
So there wouldn't be a requirement for the market element of the scheme to the mix.
I mean, we'd expect a mix
Yes.
of homes across, you know, across the scheme with
Part
one or part 1.
Yes.
But yeah, the actual viability tested target. So.
Okay. And it would be, obviously, that would be the 40% of the social rent. And it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason for part 3 going from 5 to 15 is that because
It's effectively, I think, 5. Like it was previously 5% aligned with what average farmers the need. And it's like it's basically the equivalent of like 5 divided by the 35% affordable housing, I think. So it's kind of like an equivalent, like, well, you know, if you're looking at the scheme that's conservative housing, what is roughly that equivalent percentage? If that makes sense.
and that's, as you say, those elements are all within the context of part 1 of this policy, which is that mix. Okay. Right. Comments on H4 as modified. No. Okay. Right. Policy H5 is built to rent. So this is, talk me through what the modification does here.
Bear with me.
Introduces a 30%.
Yeah, so it basically seeks to align with what's in the current London plan target for build to rent, which is kind of a similar sort of fast track approach. So private sites will seek to deliver 35% and public sites and sites on industrial land and so-called residential units. So, and the text fits the same as what it is in CH3.
Is the London plan review changed to go to rent?
Yeah.
It's one.
Yeah.
Why isn't it similarly expressed as H3?
I mean, we could express it the same way as H3. I don't see a problem with that. I think it's just, yeah. I don't think that's a particular reason why we did it like that. We just at the time of drafting. That's just how we approached it. But yeah, I'm not opposed to it.
But the intention is that any comments on that? Yeah, go on.
I would just say that I think each silent on what the thresholds are, and those percentages are set out in London Plan, see picture level.
Yeah.
So I just refer back to the London Plan.
So if H11 in the London Plan
Yeah.
changes,
Exactly, yeah, to create a intention in the London, 2 years time. Sure that those are aligned.
right, also, anyone else on H5? H8, purpose-built student accommodation. Same question. This is, again, Scott percentages referred to. But the plan,
The intent's the same like what's in the London Plan. So again, we'd be happy to make that change.
Unite, do you have any comments on this? No. It includes a percentage figure, so that could be removed. Targets at the time.
Yeah, well, we've got issues with PBSA viability, taking that part of the work.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Right, okay, thank you for that. So in terms of the affordable housing requirements, we've been through those, that's fine, that was helpful. Thank you for the council for putting those forward. So that brings me on to the next issue, which is BFN4, which we talked about the last hearing session, but there's a modification proposed, which reflects the action points. So basically, it retains the prioritisation of the council's objectives, which is qualified now by a number of things, I think. One, by reference to the threshold approach and the fast track route. The only thing you have to meet there to qualify for that, as you just said, is the affordable housing threshold, and the family owners for the social rent element. So that then means BFN4 applying to viability testing groups. This is where modification introduces two things. When the site-specific considerations include abnormal costs and things such as that, and the need to provide any new or improved infrastructure or mitigation necessary to make the proposal acceptable in terms, which I think then you prioritise these things from the council's point of view. So a number of things like that. I think that one, it provides that flexibility to plan the operations, recognition for certain mitigations are essential, so that they have to come first. I guess it takes a step closer to London Plan, because if the mitigations, transport improvements or whatever, bring value in this, as a prioritisation. I think the GLA said at the last session that whilst they objected to the prioritisation, it wasn't a general conformity issue as it was. Does the modification make it slightly better? Better?
It's like tech issue, and I don't get the monitoring.
Oh, right.
So we came not prepared to look at that. So I think yes, fundamentally that prioritization.
Yeah,
but
it's now qualified. Before you get into that prioritisation, it requires taking account of site-specific considerations and the need to provide any new or improved infrastructure or the mitigations necessary to make the proposal acceptable planning terms. So it introduces other things that would have to be achieved before you start prioritising.
Yeah, I think issue the London Plan policy. Transport
Yeah.
structures. I think fundamentally it's definitely everything responds and like that. So I think we have it doesn't really change everything in the sense of there's no specific kind of bringing back up the higher infrastructure, but it's helpful that infrastructure is now there. So it's still below Lexus employment and training. So yeah, I think
essentially infrastructure is elevated above those other things. But you may say public transport improvements aren't necessarily essential, but they are the priorities to contribute towards that.
Yeah, so I think it is to an extent. So I say, as I said, it wasn't something that download it to my desktop to be sure.
Right. Okay. So we'll see if any people can comment on that modification. I think the other thing that Sir William had mentioned, and I think we can just raise it, whether this BF84 Part 2 is where the allowance is made for site-specific viability assessments. Yeah, we talked about the limitations of in Newham. I suppose I think the request from Sir William, or suggestion from William, is that this acknowledgement of things that were not factored into our plan viability assessment need to be referred to in the plan to provide that clear framework. Dr. Lee, your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, on abnormal costs, the report is explicit, they're not included.
The report is, yeah.
It's clear. So if anyone reads the policy and then reads the viability study, then we'll know that it's exclusive of abnormal costs. So they can, if they want to, draw that to the council's attention by making it simple.
And as I pointed out, BPG talks about site-specific viability assessments. One of the things it should do is look back at what the assumptions were in the whole plan viability assessment and explain, well, you didn't take account of that, or you took account of that, but it's changed now to this. So there's a mechanism there. I suppose, yes, that's understood. But I suppose the question is, what would it be helpful if the plan acknowledged what the whole plan viability assessment didn't factor in? If there are some significant things that the council acknowledges weren't for reasons that we discussed.
It would be very odd to seek to exclude abnormal costs from an FBA if there are real abnormal costs. There are 2 points. I've never seen a plan explicitly set out how the viability study departs from specific viability in terms of and B, I've never seen an FBA review for local authority seeking to exclude abnormal costs. I've never seen an FBA review of a FBA not taken into account because they are legitimate costs set out in the PPG.
So no need.
And quite rightly, I think if the authority sought to exclude those costs from an FBA process, the applicant would have grounds for the costs of an appeal.
Okay, thank you. Right, you can come back on that, Sir William, if you wish, but any other comments people wish to make about the modification of the VFN for Part 3? No, Sir William.
So, yeah, I think our point about what wouldn't be included, it was just that it was perhaps more transparent and effective to have something in there as a supporting statement to explain the limitations of the whole plan viability process. So one didn't have to read 300 pages and pick out what is and isn't. So I think that qualifies about how viability may be taken account. One might assume that the outputs of the plan are broadly set in stone, as we know that UNPPF is trying to do that. It's trying to say, use the whole plan viability basis at the starting point. It is common ground and agreed and transparent what it doesn't take into account. Then it just helps the decision maker and other parties reflect on that supporting statement. You don't have to go tracking through PPG, whole plan viability, etc. It's just it's in the local plan. therefore it's okay for everyone to see.
Okay, understood. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, just very quickly on that. As we pointed out earlier, applicants are meant to look back at the plan viability and account for why there is a. So they need to go through in any case, even if the plan explicitly said there are things not in there.
Yeah, that's the PPG. My reading of the PPG process is you look to see what you justify in terms of, well, the whole plan viability assume this, but this is what the reality is in this case. Okay, so I got the point. I'll have a look again at the wording and etc. I mean, by the acknowledgement in BFN 4 part 3 of site-specific considerations, I mean that's flagged up as a
Yeah, no, it was,
so that that's
so thank you.
right. Anything else on that one? Okay, well, let's just then take a look back at where we started. Back on take one about what the viability assessment shows us. We've talked about it. I mean, the context, which the council pointed out in its original response to AP2, and this is some of these things have evolved, come through various hearing sessions. But there's even at that stage there was some modification proposed, which the council say, well, we will have to improve flexibility and therefore viability. So they were so just to go through things that were listed then, and there may be others that you wish to mention now. One was about tall building heights, tall building zones, flexibility outside the zones or the edge zones, various tweaks to parts of the plan, including paragraph 3 and the indicative diagrams, etc., to provide clarity about the role of policies and how you can achieve them and through flexibility, co-design, master planning, etc. Some of the specific site application policy wording is to more flexibility. And then, of course, the one that we just talked about, more prioritisation, site-specific considerations, etc. So that's various things. Is there anything else I want to draw my attention to? They're the main things. So that's context. We've then got the 35% policy in effect now, and if it were to change to something different, to the PG, we've also got the viability of the most from levels as a starting point, percent or whatever else. If we take the 35% for now, we've got the tables that will provide in response to ED26. In the ED26, I think, summarised again, the council has provided a table saying which of the benchmark land values, which of the scenarios were most appropriate. So, when we went through the application, what that shows us. And whilst on the first 60%, there was a lot of if you looked at the allocations. I think if you look at, say, the relevant scenario and the relevant benchmark land value, 35% of the employment and training needs, I think I've counted 13 allocations, which are either marginal or not viable. Over 4 applications in 42, 44. Sorry, 45. There we go. Okay, so we're down to now a proportion, 13 out of 45. And if the employment and training is not applied, it's down to under 10. Values and etc. That's my reading of it. So a significantly different picture than the submitted plan with 60%. Anything you want to say in response to that? I mean, we've also talked about, on if you went through those allocations that are shown to be not viable or viable, we've also talked about schemes being progressed, so things being addressed in different ways, which demonstrates that that's not the end of the story by any means.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly the study in its entirety looked at various organising incentives, and we're focused on the 35% being the fast track target. It's important to stress that the borough will apply the central rate target in the sense of that word, and it had consensus increase or has level 20. So the 35% is not in anyone's mind, if the council are aware, quota, so they're not seeking to enforce that where it can't be delivered. So the sites that aren't currently green would come forward if the landowner is wanting to bring it forward now at a lower affordable housing level. If they're prepared to wait over the plan period to a later point, then they can bring it forward at whatever viable level is at the time they bring the site forward.
And equally, some of the sites that are now showing green or may have very significant abnormal costs, meaning that actually they can't go through the fast track route because they need to provide the viability evidence in that case. It is what it is. But as you've explained, you know, the complexity of these sites in London, in particular, that's where we are. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's just a point of fact, though. Point of fact. Yes. Sort of brings attention that analysing the EDO 26A data, 7% of the sites.
Sorry?
7% of the 408 tests that were done were viable at 60% full housing. That's with the employment and training included.
Yeah.
Whereas at 35% of the employment and training, it's 48% of the sites. With no employment and training, it's only 50% of the sites. And at 20% full housing, it goes up to 65%, 68% with no employment and training. So I'm just going back to your first statement. You mentioned most of the should be viable. I still think 35 based on the data is showing that not based. If we assume that MPPF paragraph 50 says that we should be viable, assuming viable to start with, then something 52% of the sites wouldn't be. And I just wonder, to the fact, whether that would be setting up.
Okay, but of those 400 and whatever scenarios, some of them aren't actually what the plan is proposing, or the benchmark land element, the appropriate one. So hence why I asked the council for each one to say which the most appropriate benchmark land value is. And if you look at those benchmark land values and the scenario says the appropriate mix for the allocation, I've counted up that 13 are shown to be viable.
I think we still put in our rec about the optimistic element.
Well, that's different.
But yes,
I'm just saying that I don't give a lot of weight to your analysis of 408 tests because some of them aren't relevant, I don't think, because they're not using the right benchmark, or they're not the scenario that the allocation policy is proposing. That's right. I mean, it's never a perfect fit. You have to make judgment about the best. We had one example today, whether it should be BLV3 or BLV or whatever. But I'm just using what you provided, and you have an opportunity to look at that. So that's where I'm at. I think that it shows that scenario, 13 of the allocations out of 5 are more. I need the majority up. Now, whether you agree with all the input assumptions, I understand.
It goes back to the point we've discussed previously, versus the lowest common denominator for policy setting. So the council or other boroughs, they could adopt a policy target based on the majority of needs being viable at a point in time. But over the plan period, viability will change due to decrease in input, and therefore the adopted approach elsewhere at Newham historically has been set a target, recognise it can't always be met. But if you don't have the high target of 25%, then those that could have done 25% won't do so.
That's not national policy, though, is it?
Well,
better operating target so that you can.
Yes, that's right, sir. But then London plan policy is also inconsistent with regards to national policy.
Well, I think we are where we are. We've got a fast track route. The London plan's grappling with this, and it's got a mechanism to kind of try and reconcile those things. Whereby it sets a kind of aspirational target, but also acknowledges the ELA's provided data, haven't you, that by using that fast track route, you're actually achieving more affordable homes than was previously the case by setting targets that. Okay, so
Yeah, I think on that last point, that data reflects more percentages granted delivery.
right.
I'm just going to be slightly careful about that, because I don't think there are. I'll just take us back, and I promise you I won't repeat the point, but we're just talking about what is viable. I've manually counted 174 sales out of 286. It's quite hard to understand exactly what we're talking about, but I found the majority of 35% weren't viable. But the point is they're viable prior to all of the other points that we've just been raising: abnormal costs, building safety, etc., etc. So we still sit on the position that we're not sure, well, it doesn't appear that policies are viable. They need to be optimistic but deliverable, which then takes us back to the previous point that I raised. But I just wanted to qualify that, because we're talking about viability as a policy, but we're not then taking into account the exclusions that then exist. And I would just finally say, I don't think any policy that tries to pull up to us more affordable housing than a deliverable viable policy, and I don't think there's any evidence of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Anything else on viability? Indeed, anything else? Yes.
Very, very minor point, if I may, just I've done my homework. The 35% table by Dr. Lee, I think, tested the affordable tenure mix is actually 75-25. Now, that's not what they're proposing in terms of the basic tenure mix, which is 65-35. So I would imagine if Dr. Lee rerun the appraisal based on 65-35, the result would be slightly better.
Right.
But obviously we don't have that evidence in that. Just a minor point based on the evidence in front of us.
Thank you. Understood. So you say if anything, push it better in the sense.
Slightly, because the interview will be slightly viable compared to the trends.
Thank you. Right. So the next item on the agenda is general conformity with London Plan. Does the GLA wish to say anything in terms of the overall picture now, where we're assuming the plan was modified in the ways that have been proposed or have been, drafted as potential modifications?
So I think I statement perhaps with some of us now, I believe if I'm hand over the outstanding.
Yes.
So with these proposed modifications, that conformity concern goes away.
Okay, thank you.
Very straightforward.
Yeah.
And we already spoke about housing, but certainly in this case, in terms of coming in line with the London Plan threshold approach to affordable housing across the various types of housing provision, we don't have any concerns with modifications. So, if this was the plan, I don't more of an issue.
And the other one that was reflected in studying the common ground, because it was done earlier on in the examination, was the housing targets and that you had to come
Yeah, I'm assuming that, but obviously we haven't been coming to all the sessions, but I'm assuming the kind of the GLA's position was clear about ensuring that the plan reflected London Plan housing targets up to 2029. As long as it continues to do that, then again, that would basically because we're done.
Yes.
And it
And there aren't any of the other modifications, he says, thinking about Eastern Gasworks, that push it in the other direction.
So I think, as I've expressed this to both the council and say, obviously the GLA's concerns are that kind of proposed modification to remove MOL came up through the hearing session. That's not our approach. We felt there was evidence lacking proposed modification, like allocation and understand we discussed this morning, those very clearly set out the expectations around what MOL bringing it into public access, the level of kind of open space, biodiversity, sports provision benefits that will be achieved by that. So if those are taken more, then I don't see that we would raise the general population qualification.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. Right. Okay. So I was going to have a break now, but I don't think I need to. So there's not a great deal more I can say about the next steps in the examination, other than there are a few little actions arising from some of the things we've done. The issue of the AIM written comments that we weren't able to make this morning, which I'll get back to. So there will be some final action points related to the details we talked about today, and which leaves what happens next. Someone raised this earlier, and I said, well, I don't think that I'm going to have to be for the length of time before I can provide clarity on where we go next. So I think on the issue of East Ham Gasworks, I think what I will be saying is that we'll be moving to modification along the lines as we have on that basis. That would make sense in that respect. In terms of my other unresolved, hypothetical questions about viability and in particular, the discussion we've had today in the proposed modification, it reassures me that the picture will be satisfactory in that regard. I don't think there are any other big issues that legislators need to address. That's not a bit of work going through the action points, modifications, etc. But there aren't any big outstanding things that hold things up. So what I would suggest we have next is two things. One, to respond to the action points from today and whatever else there is in terms of detail. And then thinking about the modifications that I say are essential soundness from the ED20 version, his schedule, and how that's presented in terms of public consultation, which I don't think we need to talk about now in any detail. But I think generally we need to just think about how it's easiest to present a modification, whether the policies vary. Some of them are reasonably short, some of them are very long. So it's a question of how do you present that to get the overall picture in the most clear way as one modification to the policy. And then the extent to which the modifications to the implementation text themselves are main modifications. I think because they do affect the way policies can be interpreted and will be applied, I think it's probably safest to treat them as main modifications, unless they are fairly descriptive. I think the reason justification is some of the changes around that. Maybe some of the things that were agreed to kind of reflect particular wishes of some representors that are just factual stuff. Well, I don't think they are necessarily main modifications, not essential. But there could be things that the council did as a minor mod. So that's really what I will work with the council to finalise these modifications. So, I mean, my understanding, I suppose, of the council is that we wish to move this forward as soon as possible in terms of consultation on the main modifications. Yeah. Are the council elections this year? Yeah. So we're affected by a pre-election period. Yes. When does that start?
So it's March, end of March.
What are the elections? So what's our civil service guidance? But what can happen in the pre-election period? Sorry?
You can't go up to consultation.
No. Can consultation carry on during that period?
It can be extended till after the pillar period, I think, but can't be during the pillar period.
Yeah. So practically then, are we talking about main modifications consultation after the 7th of May?
Yes.
Right. Okay, anything anybody wishes to say or ask about that? So what I'll do is I'll do an action point note from today, and I will then subsequently do a note about the process by which we get to the main modifications. But I think that election, I mean, I don't think, that makes sense. I think I'd be in the same position as you say the council is. We wouldn't want to start or run the consultation through the pre-election period. Okay, well, good. Thank you all for your contributions. I fully expect, this to be the last hearing session, but you never know what may happen in response to the notifications. It is occasionally necessary to come back afterwards, but that is not the case. So thank you all for your contributions, and in particular to the council, and for your positive engagement with the process.
Yeah.
Great, good. Right, we'll end there. Thank you.